spirit rejoices in God, my Savior. My soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God. My soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God, my Savior. My soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit will rejoice in God. My soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God, my Savior. My soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit will rejoice in God. My soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit.
And a very, very good 2022 to you. Well, I'm doing things just a little bit differently today as we begin the new year and I get back to doing these recordings on Wednesday. For obvious reasons, and most all of you will know, I have not been available to do these last two Wednesdays, so hopefully I'll be back in the saddle again. And so it's good to have you with us. As you can see, I am outside. I'm in the backyard, you might say, the back patio of our new house, which we are, you might say, moved in, but certainly everything is not in place as we've been dealing with the other situation in our lives, but I'm trying to do it a little bit at a time. And we appreciate your continued prayers for our daughter, Melissa, and for us and the whole family as we really just kind of stand aside and see how God works directly and through all the medical staff that are attending to Melissa right now. Today we are on the 23rd Psalm. Remember I said somehow I skipped from 13 to 18, and so I did 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, and now 23. I'm going to spend 2 Wednesdays on the 23rd Psalm, then I'm going to go back and get those that I skipped for some reason. Don't know why I did that. But as we think about the 23rd Psalm today, you know, I can't figure out what I would say that really hasn't already been said about this wonderful, wonderful piece of scripture. The Lord is my shepherd. I don't even need to read it today, and I'm not going to read it today. I'll read it next week, but I'm not going to read it today. But when you think about this shepherd's psalm, this Psalm of David, you really get more than one perspective. And so as David unfolds the role of that good shepherd, he speaks from the perspective of the shepherd. But he also speaks from the role of one of the sheep, which is what he is when it comes to God being the shepherd, then David would be the sheep. And so you also see the perspective of sheep and how they feel and how they live when under the guidance and care of the Lord as their shepherd. And so what I want to share with you this morning is something I shared in part, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks ago now, maybe 4 weeks ago, on Sunday night, when we talked about Jesus saying, I am the Good Shepherd. And I want to share with you a reading that is used to describe the shepherd and the sheep and how shepherding is done in the area of Palestine and surrounding areas. And so it starts like this. Old Fernando D'Alfonso is a Basque shepherd employed by one of the big Nevada sheep outfits. He is rated as one of the best sheep rangers in the state, and he should be. For behind him are at least 20 generations of Iberian shepherds. But D'Alfonso is more than a sheep herder. He is a patriarch of the guild, the traditions and the secrets of which have been handed down from generation to generation. Despite a 30-year absence from his homeland, he is still full of the legends, the mysteries, the religious fervor of his native hills. I sat with him one night under the clear, starry skies, his sheep bedded down beside a pool of sparkling water. As we were preparing to curl up in our blankets, he began to quote the 23rd Psalm. There in the desert, I learned the shepherd's literal interpretation of this beautiful poem. David and his ancestors, said D'Alfonso, knew sheep and their ways. And David has translated a sheep's musing into simple words. The daily repetition of this psalm fills the sheep herder with reverence for his calling. We take this poem as a lodestone to guide us. It is our bulwark when the days are hot or stormy, when the nights are dark, when wild animals surround our bands. Many of its lines are statements of the simple requirements and actual duties of a Holy Land shepherd. Whether he lives today or followed the same calling 6,000 years ago, phrase by phrase, it has a well understood meaning for us. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Sheep instinctively know, said D'Alfonso, that they have been folded for the night. The shepherd has mapped out their grazing for the morrow. It may be that he'll take them back over the same range, or it may be that he'll go to new grazing ground. They don't worry. His guidance has been good in the past, and they have faith in the future, because they know he has their well-being in view. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. Sheep graze from around sunrise until late morning, then they lie down for 3 or 4 hours and rest, said D'Alfonso. When they are contentedly chewing their cuds, the shepherd knows they're putting on fat. Consequently, the good shepherd starts his flocks out in the early hours on the rougher herbage, moving on through the morning to the richer, sweeter grasses, finally coming with the band to a shady place for its forenoon rest in fine green pastures for the best grazing of the day. Sheep, while resting in such happy surroundings, feel contentment. He leadeth me beside the still waters. Every shepherd knows, said the Basque shepherd, that sheep do not like to drink gurgling water. There are many springs high in the Holy Land and whose waters run down the valleys only to evaporate in the desert sun. Although the sheep need water, they prefer not to drink from these fast-flowing streams. The shepherd must find a place where rocks or erosion have made a little pool, or else he fashions with his hands a pocket sufficient to hold at least a bucketful. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Holy Land sheep exceed in herding instinct the Spanish Merino or the French Rabouillet, D'Alfonso continued. Each takes his place in the grazing line in the morning and keeps the same position throughout the day. During the day, however, a sheep may leave its place and go to the shepherd, whereupon the shepherd stretches out his hand as the sheep approaches with expectant eyes and mild little baas. The shepherd rubs its nose and ears, scratches its chin, whispers affectionately in its ears. The sheep, meanwhile, rubbing against his leg, or if the shepherd is sitting down, nibbles at his ear and rubs its cheek on his face. After a few minutes of this communion with his master, the sheep returns to its place in the feeding line. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. There is a valley of the shadow of death in the Holy Land. It is south of Jericho Road, leading from Jerusalem to the Dead Sea, and is a narrow valley through the mountain range. Climatic grazing and conditions make it necessary for the sheep to be moved through this valley for seasonal feeding. The valley is 4.5 miles long. Its sidewalls are over 1,500 feet high in places, and it is only 10 or 12 feet wide at the bottom. Travel through the valley is dangerous because its floor, badly eroded by cloudbursts, has deep gullies. Actual footing on solid rock is so narrow in places that a sheep cannot turn around, and it is an unwritten law of shepherds that flocks must go up the valley in the morning hours and down towards the eventide, lest flocks meet in the middle. Mules have not been able to make a trip for centuries, but sheep and goat herders from earliest Old Testament days have maintained a passage for their stock. About halfway through the valley, the walk crosses from one side to another at a place where the path is cut in two by an 8-foot gully. One section of the path is about 18 inches higher than the other. The sheep must jump across it. The shepherd stands at this break and coaxes or forces the sheep to make the leap. If the sheep slips and lands in the gully, the shepherd's staff is brought into play. The old-style crook is encircled around a large sheep's neck or a small sheep's chest, and it's lifted to safety. If a more modern narrow crook is used, the sheep is caught about the hooves and lifted up to the walk. Many wild dogs lurk in the shadows of the valley looking for prey. After a band of sheep has entered the defile, the leader may come upon such a dog. Unable to retreat, the leader baas a warning. The shepherd, skilled in throwing his rod, hurls it at the dog and knocks it into the washed-out gully, where it's easily killed. Thus the sheep have learned to fear no evil, even in the valley of the shadow of death, for their master is there to aid them and protect them from harm. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. David's meaning is a simple one, said D'Alfonso. When conditions on the Holy Land sheep ranges are known, poisonous plants abound that are fatal to grazing animals. Each spring the shepherd must be constantly alert. When he finds the plants, he takes his mattock and goes on ahead of the flock, grubbing out every stalk and root he can see. As he digs out the stalks, he lays them upon little stone pyres, some of which were built by shepherds in the Old Testament days, and by the morrow they are dry enough to burn. In the meantime, the sheep are led into the newly prepared pasture, which is now free from poisonous plants. And in the presence of their deadly plant enemies, they eat in peace. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. At every sheepfold there's a big earthen bowl of olive oil and a large stone jar of water. As the sheep come in for the night, they are led to the gate. The shepherd lays his rod across the top of the gateway, just higher than the back of the sheep. As each sheep passes in single file, he quickly examines it for briars in the eyes, snags in the cheek, or scratches. When such conditions are found, he drops the rod across the sheep's back and it steps out of line. Each sheep's wounds are carefully cleaned. Then the shepherd dips his hand into the olive oil and anoints the injury. A large cup is dipped into the jar of water, kept cool by evaporation in the unglazed pottery, and is brought out never half full, but always overflowing. The sheep will sink its nose into the water clear to its eyes, if fevered, and drink until refreshed. When all the sheep are at rest, the shepherd lays his staff on the ground within reach, in case it is needed for protection of the flock during the night. He wraps himself in his heavy woolen robe and lies down across the gateway, facing the sheep, for his night's sleep. So, concluded D'Alfonso, after all the care and protection the sheep have given, a sheep may well soliloquize in the twilight, as translated into the words by David. Surely, goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever.